Oh, hi. Hi. Oh,
Hey, how's it going?
it must be Thursday morning. It
Oh,
must be book club.
I feel like it just came so quickly.
I have had my nose in this book. I am
But but but
loving
but, but
it.
where where have you been?
Oh, I've been in a book. I have had my nose in a book.
Oh, what? Me too. Which one?
This one I just picked up.
Oh, I I think we have the same book.
How do we keep doing this? Every single time we end up reading the exact same book. Did you read chapters 1 and 2?
You know what? Coincidentally, yes, I did.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, I guess it's time that we should welcome everyone to this episode of the Business Building Book Club. Welcome one, welcome all, whether you are live with us on a Thursday morning at 7:30 Eastern or you are catching the replays. We love you nonetheless. This time we are in fact diving in to Wired for Story. Now, when I picked this book for book club, I wanted to challenge myself to pick a book that would help me become better in an area that makes me really nervous.
Hmm.
Storytelling. Like, I can tell stories off the top of my head, that's one thing, but really understanding the science behind it was something that I wanted to push myself a little bit more. So I picked up this book. I didn't read anything about it except that it came highly reviewed. And so I tell Lefty and I tell Mark, pick up a copy, start reading. I have a background in psychology and neuroscience. I used to stick people in MRIs, tell them stories, and see what was happening in their brains and how their bodies were reacting. So this book has a very, very special place in my heart. And I also think, while I'm talking, I also think that we definitely want to make sure that Jen, you are watching because Jen is an awesome member of our book club
So awesome.
community and she's also an incredible copywriter. So
Yes.
I cannot wait to see her thoughts and opinions on this and I want to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. So make sure you leave them in the chat whether you're watching on our Facebook group or on our YouTube channel or over on the Create with Left Terrace YouTube channel as well. We are all one big worldwide family there.
Big,
So
big, big fan.
so you guys know I'm excited about this book. But Lefty,
I mean, I I kind of dabbled into this last week before we finished off last Thursday's episode. Uh, I have not been able to put this book down. Okay, um, we already know that I had a problem with how things were written in jab 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 right hook, and and I'm also not a fan of like super tiny text, even though the pages are not that big. But there's a lot of words on every single page. And when I first looked at this, I was like, oh, the eyesore. I was like, I'm gonna just have to read and read, or I'm gonna have to skim and fill in the blanks later. I have not been able to put this book down. Okay. I was supposed to read chapters 1 and 2. Guys, I'm halfway through chapter 4. And Molly, you've inspired me to do this one specific task, which I've started doing in my books, and that's highlight.
yes.
Okay.
Welcome to the dark side.
Absolutely. I mean, look at the saber behind me. But I started highlighting and I realized that, you know what? I noticed the power of highlighting because I go back to my older books and it's like, oh, I wish I knew the page, or I wish I could just quickly find that highlighted moment, and it's nowhere to be found because I didn't highlight before. But
Mhm.
I've never highlighted so much before in a book. This is like from the first page introduction, and let me
Yep.
read the first thing that stood out to me. Our brain is hardwired to respond to story. The pleasure we derive from a tale well told is nature's way of seducing us into paying attention to it.
Mm.
And to go back on what Molly said about how she can talk your ear off and tell you as many stories as she possibly can in one sitting, it's different when you're telling a story versus writing one. Right? Whether it's for Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads now. I mean, is that even still a thing? But how we tell stories and how we write them are totally different from how we're going to say it. Even though the majority of us write how we speak, that's not the correct way of actually writing. So yeah, this just that one sentence alone, and we haven't even gotten to chapter 1 yet, blew my mind with how I'm gonna push my storytelling moving forward. Just from that.
I love it. I love it. So before I get into the format of the book, Lefty inspired me last week. If you were watching last week's episode, he left a little Easter egg in the back that sent me on a wild adventure. So talking about story is something that so many of us struggle with. We know it even tells us in the book, we can identify a good story or a bad story in an instant. But when it comes to actually being able to write down what made that story important is completely another game. So in the world of my old research, we would put people into MRIs, we would show them images, we would tell them stories, we would have them watch a movie, all of these different ways of engaging in a narrative, and we'd see what their brains and their bodies were doing, how they were reacting. And it is so interesting to put the connection between what we are saying and the stories we are telling and the science behind what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Because if we want to move people from a place of indecision to a place of making that commitment, we call this conversion. Whether it's we want them to see our video sales letter and we want them to convert at the end of it. We want them to see our webinar and we want them to convert at the end of it. We want them to read our blog posts or be part of our social community and get the information and get the stories they need to convert and make that decision with us. And so, well, I'm always looking for as many tools as possible to help me in the world of story, to help me stay creative. And so, Jen, I know you're watching right now. Let me know if you have a pack of these. These are the Pip Deck Storyteller Tactics. So this is this really cool, if you're looking for resources, it's a really cool set of cards that are all different types of storytelling tactics. They give you recipe cards that you can combine different introductions and hooks and all of that stuff. They have different cards that talk about concept or structure or adventure and all of that. But yeah, Jen, oh my gosh, you got to get yourself a pack. Everyone who deals with story, whether you are a copywriter and you deal with story intimately every day, or you are just getting started and you want to be able to create more interesting content. You don't want your content to just be washed out. These are great ways of just rethinking things.
And I know, like, we're all living in the AI revolution right now. Like we know this, but if you've never written copy before, or even if you do write copy for a living, or you just write stories for a living, don't kill the muscle memory of what you used to have or what you don't have yet. Like when I always bring in new technologies, I always think to myself first, okay, I'm going to use this new piece of tech. Fantastic. But instead of, the typical line of like, what would Jesus do? Or what would Molly do? Or what would anybody do? I always ask myself, if they shut down the grid and I did not have access to any of my tools, can I still do my work?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you need to learn the fundamentals of getting things done, writing stories, editing videos, doing whatever, and using those AI tools as a secondary.
Yeah.
Because if it all goes to hell, you're going to be the one out of business because you never knew how to do it to begin with, or you lost your muscle memory because you were just like, I have this tool now to do it for me and I don't have to think.
Well, here's a real life example. If we take AI and technology out of it for a second,
Okay.
Back in the day, remember the Great Blackout?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so here in North America, our section of North America, one day in the summer, all the power went out across like a large portion of North America, and it was in the hot of the summer. So this was happening while I was working in downtown Toronto. I was working at a canoe camp. So we were unaffected. We were still, the water was fine. The ferries were still running. Like everything was as normal until the end of that workday. And I usually will walk down the street and go visit my mom at Canada's biggest newspaper. And what was so interesting that day was walking into that building that evening and there being absolutely no power. Yeah. But whether there's power or not, the newspaper still has to publish. And so I will never forget this. I walk up to the main newsroom, and that's where my mom would work and all of her colleagues. That is the busy hive of the newsroom where usually everyone's on their computers, everyone's hanging around, there's lights, and it's really bright, but it was ominously dark. Yeah. And there was no power, none at all. But the newspaper still had to publish. And I saw a whole bunch of people streaming out of the newsroom to go up to a different floor to this one big conference room. Of course, I'm a kid. Well, I'm a teenager, so I'm going to follow. I want to see what's happening. So I go up to this conference room where the big editors are and the managing like the big wigs are all there. Everyone on deck. And one laptop with 50% battery left.
No.
And what was so cool was when we run businesses, a lot of the time is as we become bigger and bigger in our organizations, we delegate those smaller day-to-day tasks, usually to our assistants, or in the case of a newspaper, you would delegate that task to the writers.
Yeah.
But because there was only one computer open, they had the big head, the managing editor was sitting there pounding out on the keyboard with writers and editors sitting on the floor at her knee, helping her put all of this together. They were using what was in their brains, their hardwired skill of being able to tell stories. They were not relying on being able to search anything on the internet because there was no access at that point. Everything was shut down. And it was incredible to see that switch be flipped and everyone go back to that hardwired skill they had. And man, they pounded out a beautiful paper just with the information they literally had at their fingertips and their skills they had that they were relying on, like their hardwired skills. And I will never forget that. And from that day forward, I have been determined to learn to tell better stories and not rely on AI to do it for me, not rely on searching up. If you're in the ClickFunnels community, you know Jim Edwards has funnel scripts. And so there's scripts already designed that you just plug and play. But you know what? That's not going to tell the personality of your brand. It's not going to share that personality. It's not going to give that same wow factor as if you have that ability. If you go through, you type in something in AI now, yeah, you can now go back using your new tactics and say, all right, this needs to change. This needs to change. This needs to change. And then you get frustrated and you just go, Jen, do it for me.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Make it better.
Make it better. No,
Make it
Jen
better.
is awesome. We're actually working on a project together right now. It's a competition. It's a 1-minute competition, and I'm going to be filming, of course. And Jen wrote an awesome piece for me. So yeah, that's gonna be really cool. 60 seconds. Try to get the point across. Bam.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good trick to try and work on all the time. It's like, can you condense your storytelling down to literally 30 seconds and get all the points across?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Can you do a 60-second video sales letter?
You could. I mean, yeah. You know what? I really notice now that when I'm even doing like a 60-second short, and I don't even really do them anymore, but when I do a 60-second short, it's almost like I'm just like, wow, this is long. Right? Like I'm like, wow, 1 minute is long for a short, because shorts are supposed to be like, 15 to 30 seconds, right? Maybe you're a wild card if you're in the 40-second range.
Remember that. So if you've been in the visibility hacking world for a while now, you know that I was convinced. I'm a long form girl, so I was convinced that 60 seconds was going to be the hardest thing in the world. And Lefty comes up to me and goes, "Dude, you know what's hitting real hard right now? 3-second shorts."
Yeah, it was like 3 to 5 seconds. And it's just literally a question. It's like you literally just give them the hook with a call to action.
And now my most popular shorts on YouTube are my shortest ones where I simply ask a question, no call to action.
Yeah, yeah. You want to know 3 reasons why your content isn't good enough? Comment content below.
Comment below. All right, so let's talk about the format of our book for this session.
Yes.
Wired for Story, again, is about the brain science and how that connects to the different sections of our story. It's designed specifically for what I'm getting is like narrative story writers, so people who are writing like a novel, for example. And it's helping us address where the roadblocks in our story are. And it asks us, before we get into any of the meat of this book, it asks us to be brutally honest with our stories. Brutally honest. You are not looking at your storytelling from the perspective of you or your loving mother who will support everything you do. Shout outs to my mom. But we want to put ourselves in the position of a totally disconnected audience member who is going to be able to read through. The second they get to a roadblock, they're most likely going to stop your story and they're going to move on to something else.
So can I read this?
Yes, please.
So the story secret, because this is what I love. In every chapter, they give you a story secret.
Let me get to that in 1 sec.
All right.
So everything in this book is designed around eliminating those roadblocks. Each chapter, as Lefty's mentioning here, each chapter is divided into a theme. And under that theme, we understand the psychological concept, what's happening in our brain, what is cognitively going on, and how that connects to a rule about storytelling. So in every chapter we talk about, I'll shine some light on the brain science stuff, and we'll also talk about how that connects to story. So I had something highlighted in bright orange. I didn't put a tab on it, of course.
Oh, I should.
Okay, here it is. A recent so we all know that I put people in MRIs and I look at how their brains function during stories. And so here's my big highlight in the introduction. A recent brain imaging study reported in Psychological Science reveals that the regions of the brain that process the sights, sounds, tastes, and movements of real life are activated when we are engrossed in a compelling narrative. So instead of just being aware that we are reading, that's a very different process that's going to happen. But when we are engrossed in those stories, when we are fully integrated into that story, something completely different is happening in our brain. What's happening is our brain is experiencing it as if it was real life, which is what we want to get to. So chapter one, the cognitive secret is we think in stories, which allows us to envision the future. That is literally how our brain works.
Yep.
And the story secret behind that is from the very first sentence, the reader must want to know what happens next. So, thoughts, comments, all of that stuff on chapter one.
You know what? It's so true. Like every good book, and I mean, to give further context about this book, guys and gals, it is about writing, like writing a book or a novel. But it doesn't mean that you can't read this to use for content purposes, especially if like you're somebody that writes long form content. Heck, you can even do it with short written content as well. But yeah, like the best stories get you from like the first sentence. And if you really want to translate that into videos or reels or shorts or whatever, it's the hook. Yeah. Like if you have a good hook, and the hook doesn't necessarily always have to be a line, it could even be a pattern interrupt, it could be like a transition, it could be an effect, it could be something that just makes us want to stop what we're doing and continue giving that individual our undivided attention for the next 10 to 60 seconds. And yeah, I think people need to know what they're getting into in the first couple sentences. Like one of my writers on my team, my best friend in the entire world, he has a trilogy coming out. He's in the middle of his third book, but he kills the main character in like the first paragraph.
What?
And then you're just like, what? I need to read the other 20 chapters now, because how the heck did our protagonist die in like the first paragraph? And the beauty about that is that I'm not even giving anything away, because it's something that you read so early on that there's legit no spoilers, right? Like that's how you guys got to think about content. Like even when I started writing now my Facebook post, because I love writing on Facebook, I will literally give you like a sentence or a couple words or even one word, and I'll just start that at the top and then give a couple spaces below. So the first thing you see are those few words. And then you're just like, oh, what happens next?
Yeah.
Right? I love it. There's honestly, like I said, I've never highlighted so much in my life, but Molly, you probably highlighted some other information coming from like brain scans and all that. I want to know what you think about chapter one.
So chapter one reminds us about let's talk about the brain. Let's make it super simple. Let's make it really simple. There's two areas of the brain that are important. There's the really core of your brain, the smallest part that's closest to your brainstem. This is what we refer to as our lizard brain. It's the oldest part of our brain. That's the small brain that deals with everything to do with survival. It makes sure our heart keeps beating. It deals with our breathing and our body temperature regulation. All of that is done in that core part of our brain. And then the brain that's in most other animals. I don't think any other animal doesn't have that part of their brain. What makes humans unique, though, is that we have this big, giant gray matter that sits on top of that part of our brain known as our neocortex. And that's where all of our thinking happens, all of those abstract thoughts. So if we go back to that lizard brain, that's the part of the brain that chapter 1 is addressing. It is addressing the fact that every organism has one core goal, and that's survival.
Yes.
And so if we think about the history of storytelling was all about survival. And one of the examples they bring up is hunter-gatherer communities. Well, don't eat those berries because my neighbor ate them and he died. He got really sick. Here's what happened. So once we use stories to communicate, and we used them primarily for survival reasons. So that's why our brain wants to pay attention to the stories. We want to hear, are you telling me about something that's safe? Are you telling me about an area where there's great resources? That's going to lead to my survival. Are you telling me about a place that's dangerous? I'm going to stay away from that because I'm focused on survival. So it was really cool to go, all right, let's start with the oldest part of our brain. So if say you get, this is totally off topic, but say you get like a traumatic brain injury, something on your neocortex, you're still going to be, your limbic system is still going to be functioning, even if you have difficulty thinking or processing information. If you're in a coma, for example, your limbic system is still trying to regulate your body temperature, for example, and things like that. Super cool. I'm a nerd. But when we're telling these stories, it's so, I was just absolutely fascinated at the fact that this book combines all of this stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So, yeah.
So this is one here because we kind of already dived deep a little bit into like what the story is.
Yeah.
So how do we make the story good now? Like how do we get started? Okay. And remember, in a situation coming from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you are technically the protagonist, unless you're an antagonist, because you could be that too somehow. But as the entrepreneur, we're always the protagonist. Okay.
No, our customer's the protagonist.
Then what does that make us? We're the antagonist?
Okay, maybe Jen will be able to help us with the technical words on the writing side of this. But we want to position our audience members, our potential customers, right? We want to move them. So we want to put them as the main character.
Okay.
So for example, like if you film a documentary and you're following one person, you're telling their story. So yeah, you're following the entrepreneur, you're telling their story, but you want to tell it in a way that allows your audience to see themselves in the feet of that character.
Makes sense.
So I think we're both right.
Okay. So so here's a sentence here to get you guys started. What does your protagonist have to confront in order to solve the problem you've so cleverly set up for her? Yeah. So yeah, sure. In that sentence, it would be the customer. So always think about it like this. What do they have to confront? Do they have financial issues? Do they have scaling issues? Do they have hiring issues? Like what is the main problem that they're having right now? And how do you cleverly set up that pain point for them to turn around and go, oh, okay, I get it.
So one key thing that you do is exactly what Jen's mentioning here, which is stirring up that emotion.
Exactly.
Because if we just tell them what's happening, we just describe the scene, people aren't going to put themselves in the shoes of that character. Instead, if we connect by emotion, they go, yeah, I felt that before.
Yeah. And
There's
to
this
go based on,
concept in like writing for sales where we want to understand where you're hurting, like where your customer is hurting,
Mhm.
and then where they are bleeding.
Yes.
Because if you're hurting, that's something that you could just be like, whatever. I can push that apart. A great example from McCall Jones, when I used to work with her, she has this great example. She was working with Jojo and Corey Rankin, who are marriage counselors for entrepreneurs. And they were talking about where are they hurting versus bleeding. Well,
Mhm.
if you're hurting, you have poor communication with your spouse. If you're bleeding, you go to bed at different times and you think that that's okay.
Yeah.
So when you give you that emotional, oh, there's a movement because of the emotion that you've stirred up in them. I think that's so cool.
And this is a perfect segue right here, okay? It said people can go 40 days without food, 3 days without water, and about 35 seconds without finding meaning in something.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
And
that.
if we don't have a sense of what's happening and why it matters to the protagonist, we're not going to read it. We're not. We're just going to skip it.
Exactly.
See you later.
Exactly.
And
So I gotta throw some neuroscience in here.
do it. Do it. I love
Page 9. Neuroscientists believe that the reason our already overloaded brain devotes so much precious time and space to allowing us to get lost in a story is that without stories, we'd be toast.
it.
Stories allow us to simulate intense experiences without actually having to live through them. This is the matter of life and death back to the age of the Stone Age, when you waited for experience to teach you that the rustling in the bushes was actually a lion looking for lunch, you'd end up as the main course. It's even more crucial now because once we mastered the physical world, our brain evolved to tackle something far trickier: the social realm. Story
Hmm.
evolved as a way to explore our own mind and the minds of others, as a sort of dress rehearsal for the future. That I think is so key. It's
Yeah.
that dress rehearsal idea, that idea that our customers can not only put themselves in the shoes of that character, but when they do that, they see themselves playing out all of the possibilities. So when you write a really good story like that, not only or a piece of content based around a story like that, not only are your customers each going to, or your listeners going to each get a unique story themselves, but they're going to take that story to the next level. Everyone, the way that we interact with the stories we hear, the way that I hear a story, the emotions and the past experiences that I use to color that story is going to be completely different than what Lefty's going to use to color
Yeah.
his story. And
Absolutely.
that I think is so beautiful.
And,
Go
and
science.
oh, it's and don't be that entrepreneur, that business owner, that don't be the lion in the bush. Like don't
Yeah.
look at your like don't look at your customers as lunch. You know what I mean? Like because yeah, sure, it might work in the short term. You might end up seeing numbers in your bank account that you've never seen before, but it will definitely not be long term because of that, because what happens with lunch? You eat it, it's gone, right? You can only
Yeah.
eat it for so long before it completely disappears. So don't be the lion. If anything, be like a horse, gazelle, anything that shares a pond of water with other entrepreneurs. Something.
Be a beaver.
Be a beaver, yeah. But one thing to understand too, and this was another quick sentence in this book, was as the reader, you owe the writer absolutely nothing. You don't owe the writer anything. Like nothing, zilch. So when I read this line, I thought to myself, I go, it's okay if I don't get any likes on a post, or if I get maybe a couple likes, but I don't get any comments. I have to continue writing. I have to continue posting. I have to continue getting my message out there one way or another, because it's me that owes the audience something, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Right? You don't owe me a paycheck. You don't owe me a comment. You don't owe me a like, right? Those are things that you choose to do. So keep definitely, like, if you are somebody that's stuck in that, I get no likes, get no comments, get no shares, get no nothing. If you're stuck in that limbo, just keep going, because you'll eventually strike gold. It's always those guys or girls in the caves with the picket, just going, trying to find the gold or trying to find the diamond, and they always stop right before the last hammer. And that last hammer is what's going to make everything crumble down, and is going to expose all that beautiful treasure on the other end. So just pick one last time.
Pick one. So let's talk some story basics. What is a story? Well, on page 11, we find out that there are a few key things we need to talk about so that the rest of the book makes sense. Because we're going to use some terminology from the book. So I want everyone to understand, even if you're not reading along with us, which you should be. All right. So what happens in the book is what we call the plot of the story.
Yeah.
We all know this. Someone, or the person that the book focuses on, or the story focuses on, is our protagonist. The goal is what's known as the story question. So what is the goal that the protagonist is trying to achieve? And then
tunnel hacking live.
Exactly. And then how he or she changes that journey of self-change is what the story itself is actually about. So the story is about the protagonist achieving the goal and the journey that they go on to do that. So keeping that in mind, I want you guys to write this down. These are the questions I want you to ask on a regular when you're putting stories out there.
Right here.
Question number one. Yeah. Question number one, top of page 17. Whose story is it? Literally name me whose story is it? Is it Bob's story? Is it a testimonial? Is it from, is it a case study? Whose story is it? And what's happening in the story? I want you to be able to concisely tell me what's happening. If you start out with a solid framework, you could fill in all of the fun along the way. And then the third question I want you to ask is, what's at stake? No one's going to pay attention to a story where nothing's at stake. I just watched a fantastic movie on Netflix, the movie Worth. It's a real life story about the guy who was called to be special master for the 9/11 victims compensation fund. So it's a beautiful story where we understand it's a story about this guy and all of the people around who were impacted by September 11th. It is what's at stake is this fund and compensation. If the fund is not if they don't get enough people to sign on to the fund, the entire US economy could crumble, right? We're not talking we're hurting. We now understand where we are bleeding. The entire economy could crumble because there's literally not enough money to settle all of these lawsuits. He goes through this journey where he tries out one way of doing it. It doesn't seem to be working. He has a massive transformation, changes his approach, and finds the best solution. So we understand that what is at stake. I want you to look. Are we hurting? Are we like impacted emotionally by seeing a lion? Or are we bleeding? The lion's flipping chasing us and we're going to be dinner. Are you hurting or are you bleeding? That's what I want you to think about. So those three questions. Whose story is it? What's happening in the story? And most importantly, what is at stake? Bam.
And whenever possible, tell the entire story in the first sentence.
Ooh.
That was also on the bottom of page 17.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's that really is all it is. It's just those three things. And when you can figure out, like, I mean, you could make a template out of that, right? You can make a template and literally use it for every single one of your stories moving forward. And not only that, the cool thing about it is that you can start creating like subheadings below the main headings, right?
Yeah.
And then now you build this whole entire universe, this whole entire world, right? I think it's amazing. If you guys really want to get creative, I mean, here's a task. Here's a task I can give you guys. The copyright law gets snipped and broken and cut off at the 100-year mark. So find a story that's 100 years old, that is 1923 or younger or older, I should say, and find a way to create it in your own voice.
Yeah.
Right? Like, one thing that I'm super excited for is that, because I'm a huge Batman fan, is that there's a specific comic book that I absolutely love that is literally hitting its 100th birthday, I think in like 2027, I believe it is, or 2020. Yeah, 2027. And I cannot wait, because that allows me to take that specific comic and create my own adaptation of it. So think about things that are coming up, because you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, as we like talking about, as we like to say in this business world. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just take the wheel and shape it to your own will and your own business. And that's what I plan on doing. I plan on finding a bunch of older stories that are coming to their end mark. And now I can be Batman if I wanted to, but for that specific comic book. I can't go out and do my own adaptation of like The Dark Knight, which just came out like 10 years ago. Right? So it has to be passing 100 years, and then you can turn that story into whatever the heck you want, using the exact same characters, the exact same plot, the exact same everything. That's so freaking cool, isn't it?
I love it. There is, so in order to help you guys with that task, head over, look up public domain stories in Google, and you'll find a bunch of different links to databases that have collected stories that are in the public domain, meaning their copyright has expired. So these are great places to look up different kinds of stories, try and recreate those stories. Remember, look for the emotion. And going off of that, actually, question for the audience, whether you are watching live or on the replay, question: is good writing, no, I just want to say it the way that it's written in here, because it is so perfect. Yeah, beautiful writing trumps all. Do we agree with this statement, or do we disagree with this statement? Lefty, you know the answer because it's literally in the book. But Jen, I know you're watching right now and you're a copywriter. Do you think beautiful writing is the be all and end all? Pause. Will you put your answer down in the comments?
I was just about to do that.
Well, according to our book, and I think according to me too, and I'm just going to guess according to Jen, the beautiful copywriter, the reality is that story writing trumps beautiful writing every time. because if we can have fluffy language, we can have nice words and a detailed scene. You can have the mise en place all done, but if you're not telling a story that's moving people forward, they're not going to pay attention.
And I think our fellow famous Canadian, since we have so many of them, but famous YouTuber Peter McKinnon once said, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
And I've literally lived that through my entire video creation journey. Done is better than perfect. But don't get it twisted. Done doesn't mean lack of quality.
Yeah.
It just means that take the quality that you have and, if you maybe, crap the bed on one small thing, don't beat yourself up over it. You don't have to go back and do 100 edits. Just put it out there for the world to see, because the beauty about it, and I think the one thing that people hold on to, Molly, agree or disagree, is that people feel like this has to be the one.
Yeah.
And if I don't get this right, it sets up everything for my entire business, everything for my entire brand, everything for my writing skills. But they fail to realize that after that story, oh my God, are you not going to write another one and another one and another one and another one and another one?
No, just one.
Just that one.
Just one.
You're just going to be
and only once.
The one post wonder. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So then maybe your business revolves around how good that story is. But us as entrepreneurs, as content creators, as like building this creator community, we are all learning no matter what stage we're in. It doesn't matter if we're still only making 4 figures a month or if we're making 10 figures a month. There are still learning and experiences at different stages. They might be different experiences. Mm-hmm. One has a little bit of a easier struggle than the other, but at the end of the day, we're all still learning. We're all still doing things. We're all still putting out content for the sake of putting out content. Yeah. You don't see somebody like Grant Cardone or Alex Hormozi or Eli Wild or any of these, Jeremy Minor, or any of these big guys, Tony Robbins. You don't see these guys go, well, I made it. I'm not going to write a single post ever again. I'm done. That's it. Sorry, I'm out. I already paid my dues. Now you just have to pay me, right?
Yeah.
That's not how it works. Everybody is still out there sharing experiences, sharing journey, sharing whatever. Sure, maybe Tony can buy an island, but maybe his second experience of buying a second island was completely different, and now he wants to share that journey. At any stage of the game, you can write anything, and that's what I love about it. That we're always learning from everybody. And if you want the best stories in the world, never buy a first class ticket. Always stay on the back of the plane, because those people have some. I always learn the best. I always meet the most interesting people. Those are the people that are like the backpackers. Those are the people that just bought the last minute ticket, the cheapest ticket. They don't even care if they're sitting between like 2 obese individuals and they're stuck like this. They have a story to tell you. So if you ever get an opportunity, sit closer to the back of the plane, because you're going to hear some insane experiences. And that might even trigger you to tell good experiences yourself.
Exactly.
That's a story in itself. Oh my God, Molly, I just came back from the States and I was sitting beside Joe and Joe was telling me that that's a story, right? You can literally turn a story into anything, which is, in my opinion, beautiful. It's beautiful.
And coming from our resident copywriter, Jen reminds us that it's all about mastering the show, not tell. It
Yep.
has to put the reader there in the moment. And I love this reminder, focusing on what they see, they hear, they smell, they taste, they touch, focusing on, remember what we talked about at the beginning, when we're telling stories, the right kinds of stories that truly set the brain on fire are the stories that let us feel we're walking through reality. So
Yeah.
when we're walking through reality, we're not reading a dull list of dialogue. Instead, we're hearing about the smell of the rain on the leaves and the sound of the crispness as the squirrels would run through the garden. Like we're literally there. We can smell the soil. Like all of those senses are being ignited. So before we wrap up, because we got to wrap up real soon.
But I do want to, if we do have a moment, I would like to just touch quickly on chapter 2.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say chapter 2, we have how to zero in on your point.
Yeah.
Our cognitive secret is when the brain focuses its full attention on something, it filters everything out. We know this. We know this. When you are enthralled in what you are doing, all the rest doesn't matter. You literally can block everything out. So
what's the secret?
What's the storytelling secret?
What's the secret behind zeroing in on my point?
Well, to hold the brain's attention, everything in a story must be there on a need to know basis. You do not serve your people the entire buffet unless you're reading one of those choose your own adventure books, but that's like, we don't do that here.
No,
we want them to be served coffee when they need it. This is a very simple thing to remember for those of you who are in the funnel building world. We know that if we serve up all of our offers and our bonuses and our upsells and our downsells all on one page, and we just say choose, just go ahead, here you go, tell me what you want, our sales numbers, our conversion numbers are going to be in the dumps.
Yeah.
But when we walk that customer through the process, step by step, Russell Brunson uses a great example where he's talking about someone going into a camping store. And at first they're like, okay, so I need a tent for camping. And the salesperson is like, oh, fantastic. You need a tent. Do you have a sleeping bag? Because you want to be warm. Fabulous. Let me show you the sleeping bags. Cool. Now, do you have camping chairs to sit around the campfire? Because I know you're not going to spend the whole night sitting in your tent. You won't be able to see the beautiful stars. Yeah, we got great camping chairs over here. And while you're sitting on those chairs, let's get some marshmallow roasting sticks. Let's get you a pack of marshmallows. Let's walk you through your unique journey and offer you what you need in the moment when you need it. And that applies to our story as well. So, Lefty, what do you think about that?
I mean, look at this highlight.
Oh, so you didn't pay attention at all to that chapter.
Why? Because I highlighted everything?
There's a bloodbath on your page of highlighter.
Well,
so read out what you highlighted. Let me know.
Well, before we get into that, I do want to say, like, yeah, every, like, I mean, I personally enjoy it when I can just be like, ooh, like, for example, as you see the lightsaber on my wall, these are not the typical lightsabers that you go and buy at a toy store and they're already pre-assembled and yada, yada, yada. I go through an entire journey of being able to build my own lightsaber from scratch, getting the handle all the way to the, do I want a rounded tip for my blade? Do I want a pointed? What color do I want? Do I want a belt buckle? Do I not want a belt buckle?
Do you want a double or a single?
Do I want it to be like plug in with a USB so I can charge it? Do I want it to be battery operated? And I go through this whole entire journey, and it makes the process so much more fun. Instead of just walking into a toy store and being like, here's your saber in a box. It does what it does, period. End of story. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you can pick between red or blue.
Exactly. So that's in a nutshell also like what Molly was saying about like getting all those accessories and putting the package together yourself and building it. And it's so much fun. Everybody should just shop this way. It's amazing. But this is
So how do we use those that story tactic in our stories? What does it say in the book? What did you highlight?
well, this is what I highlighted. Look around your house. Chances are you bought just about everything you see because while you weren't looking, a clever story snuck in and persuaded you to. It's not that you're easy to boss around, but a well crafted story speaks first to your cognitive unconscious, which marketers hope will then translate into something conscious. Like, it may be midnight, but I really do deserve a Big Mac. Gee, she looked so happy. I wonder if I can get my doctor to prescribe that pill. It'd sure be fun to have a beer with that guy. I think I'll vote for him. Scary, huh? So take back some of that power. Writers would do well to embrace their counterintuitive fact. The defining element of a story is something that has little to do with writing. Rather, it underlies the story itself and is what renowned linguist William Labov has dubbed evaluation, because it allows readers to evaluate the meaning of the story's events.
I love that. I love that. Before we wrap up, there's also one thing we didn't even mention yet about the format of this book.
What?
Because we're all about taking action, right? We
Oh,
are action takers. So at the end of this, every chapter in this book, it's like we are back in with
The YouTube formula.
Pat Flynn and the YouTube formula, where we have action steps. So there's actual things that we can do, actual tasks that we can accomplish while we're working through every chapter. So I highly recommend you pick up a copy of Wired for Story from Lisa Cron. Read along with us. We're going in deep with this book. We're going to do 2 chapters every episode. So you got time to pick up your copy, join us, because next week we will dive into chapters 3 and 4. Oh, what are we doing for chapters 3 and 4, Molly? Chapter 3 is called I'll Have What He's Feeling. And chapter 4 is What Does Your Protagonist Really Want? So with that teaser, my friends, let's wrap up today's episode. So Lefty, what are your final thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I just hope to see more stories out there. I hope to see more people talking about real world experiences, talking about even sharing opinions in the form of stories. I mean, I have a video actually coming out tomorrow on my channel that talks about real to real, as in REEL to REAL. So, and that pretty much has to do with why Hollywood is now slowly dropping the fiction, right?
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a cool video. I've been in one of those crazy summers, which I have to like schedule and create so far in advance because I'm crazy swamped, and Jen's
Hold on. Y'all heard it.
What?
Mark this date. Lefty's working and pre-scheduling things. I win.
Oh. Well, that's because I can't keep up with the demand.
Exactly. And that's why I love batch filming and putting things out ahead of time so I can focus on my stuff. But that's besides the point.
I do that with my short form content, but I've also been doing it with my YouTube videos as well. But at the end of the day, everyone's jumping on authenticity, realism, telling stories that actually matter, that actually make sense. Like when we're going to, when we're going to the theaters now, especially, it's like we're not seeing Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Avengers. We're seeing, Pursuit of Happiness, Sound of Freedom, Oppenheimer, The Wolf of Wall Street. Like the list goes on and on and on. Like these are all true stories. These are real people that experienced real things.
Yeah.
Even what was the movie, 1970 something or 1971 or something, I don't remember the title. That was true as well. Like everything is going more towards the real stories, because people want to feel something. They want to be able to relate to something. Like, yeah, sure, you can relate to Harry Potter in some form or another, but you're never going to really understand. You might feel his hurdles, you might feel his downsides, but like you won't ever be in that position. So I think telling real, I think moving towards being more authentic is going to really push you forward in the remainder of this year and probably in the years to come, because we got to go back to that primal state, if you want to call it, and just share stories around, like, the campfire, essentially.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. I love that. So my friends, join us same bat time, same bat channel, 7:30 a.m. Eastern every Thursday here on the Business Building Book Club. If you want to catch up on previous episodes, or you want to just save the playlist, click or scan the QR code that's down there under Lefty, and you can get access to all of the other side. It's on the other side of you.
That's right.
Other side. Your other, no, he's under your arm. Nope. Other side of you. There you go. Working in 4 dimensions.
I'm like,
So scan the QR code. It'll bring you over to the playlist. You can check out all of our previous episodes, and make sure you subscribe so that you get notified of our new episodes coming out and all of the other great content we've been putting out for you. Keep your eyes on this space, because when it comes to storytelling, Lefty and I are challenging each other in some pretty exciting ways, and we have some ideas brewing of ways that we can involve you, our action takers, who want to workshop some stories in the context of content created for the purpose of conversion, our businesses. We want to be able to tell those stories in a way that leads to our bottom line, and in my eyes, leads to better impact in our communities. So let's do this. We'll tell you more about that maybe next week. I have some fun stuff I'm going to order.
I'm excited.
But yeah, until next time, my friends, go pick up your book, and we will see you next week.
Yep.
Bye.